When we think of staying warm in brutal winters, our minds immediately go to wool blankets or thick sleeping bags. Yet in World War II, when armies fought in frozen forests, bombed out cities and wind-blasted fields, there was one insulator that quietly outperformed all of them. Soldiers swore by it when blankets froze stiff, when coats soaked through, and when nights were cold enough to kill. This wasn't a luxury material, nor was it high technology. It was something far more ordinary, something overlooked today, but once considered a lifesaver. That forgotten insulator was straw, and it kept men alive where wool failed. Before you scroll away, consider this. Entire units survived the bitter European winters, not by piling on more blankets, but by sleeping on, stuffing with, and surrounding themselves with straw. Let's break down why it worked, how soldiers used it, and why this knowledge is still practical today. Straw became the soldier's secret weapon against the cold. World War II exposed soldiers to some of the harshest winters of the 20th century. In Russia, temperatures dropped below -30 Celsius, freezing weapons, water and flesh. In the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, frostbite casualties rivaled combat losses. Wool blankets, issued to most armies, absorbed moisture and quickly became heavy, damp and ineffective. Sleeping bags were rare, and when soaked, they froze into stiff boards. Soldiers needed insulation that resisted dampness, was lightweight, and most importantly, was available in bulk. Straw met all of those needs. As an agricultural byproduct, it was found across Europe in barns, fields and villages. Soldiers learned to gather it whenever possible, not just for bedding, but for stuffing into coats, boots and even helmets. Where blankets grew useless, straw held heat. It wasn't glamorous, but its effectiveness made it a staple in winter survival. The secret of straw was trapped air, not fabric weight. The reason straw outperformed blankets lies in how insulation actually works. Warmth doesn't come from the material itself, but from the air it traps. Blankets, especially when wet, compress and lose their loft, meaning they hold less air. Straw, however, is stiff and hollow. Even when slightly damp, its structure prevents collapse, keeping air pockets intact. These pockets acted as tiny barriers, slowing the escape of body heat into the frozen air. You see, when a soldier slept directly on the snow, he lost precious heat through conduction, as the ground just sucked the warmth right out of his body. But lying on a mattress of straw, several inches thick, created this wonderful thermal barrier, keeping the heat in and the cold out. Stuffing straw into clothing created a bulk that trapped heat far more efficiently than those thin wool layers. In essence, soldiers were wearing and sleeping inside natural insulation that performed better in real-world conditions than many of their issued supplies. Soldiers? Well, they used straw in some really creative and practical ways. Accounts from the Eastern Front and the Ardennes are just full of stories of soldiers relying on straw. Barns and farmhouses became coveted shelters, not just because of the roofs, but because of the straw in their lofts. Men filled their greatcoats with it, making bulky but warmer outerwear. Boots were lined with straw to keep toes from freezing, and when socks were wet or missing, straw itself replaced them. For bedding, soldiers often laid down a thick base of straw before wrapping themselves in coats or blankets. In makeshift bunkers, walls were lined with it to reduce drafts. Some units even mixed straw with mud to form insulating walls, strengthening both the structure and its warmth. The resourcefulness was endless, and the results were undeniable. Soldiers who ignored these methods often suffered frostbite, while those who embraced them endured the cold far better. Now, let's talk about how this old wartime trick can still be put to good use today. Straw remains a powerful insulator, and honestly, for survivalists, bushcrafters, or even just campers, it can be a real lifesaver. If you ever find yourself outdoors in freezing weather without any modern gear, building a straw bed is, well, one of the simplest and most effective steps you can take. Just a layer about 6 to 8 inches deep is usually enough to stop your body heat from bleeding away into the cold ground. And if you want a bit of extra warmth, you can always pile more straw on top of your body. Those little air pockets do the job of a blanket, keeping you that much warmer. Clothing, too, can be improvised with straw, you know. Just stuff handfuls inside your jacket or between your outer and inner layers, and you'll notice the difference. If your socks are wet, packing your boots with dry straw, changing it regularly of course, can really help keep your feet warm. Even crude shelters get a boost from straw walls or roofing, since all those trapped air pockets slow down heat loss. For anyone thinking about preparedness supplies, straw bales are a solid choice. They're cheap, they last a good while, and they're multi-purpose, useful for everything from livestock bedding to emergency insulation. In controlled environments, this knowledge can be tested safely. On a cold night outdoors, try lying on a bare tarp and then on a bed of straw. The difference is immediate and, well, dramatic. What soldiers discovered by necessity can be experienced directly, proving that some of the simplest solutions are still the best. The historical lesson behind this forgotten insulator is honestly quite striking. The fact that soldiers in World War II turned to straw highlights an important truth. Survival often depends less on expensive gear and more on resourcefulness. Straw was not issued, not glamorous and not designed for war. Yet it worked, sometimes better than carefully engineered supplies. It shows how understanding basic principles of insulation, air trapping, moisture resistance and layering can save lives. For history enthusiasts, straw represents the ingenuity of soldiers who adapted farming byproducts into battlefield survival tools. For survivalists, it remains a timeless lesson in using what the environment provides. And for anyone curious about resilience, it is proof that overlooked materials can carry immense value when conditions turn harsh. So, while blankets and sleeping bags filled the stories of wartime hardship, it was straw, the forgotten insulator, that often outperformed them. Its simple structure trapped air, resisted compression, and kept countless soldiers alive through winters that claimed thousands. Today, it remains a resource worth remembering, a reminder that survival is as much about knowledge as equipment. If you found this breakdown of forgotten World War II survival wisdom valuable, subscribe to In the Beginning for more deep dives into the skills and tricks that shaped history. Share this with fellow history buffs and survival enthusiasts so these lessons aren't lost. And let's keep the knowledge alive for future generations.